We want to be free. We want to do what we want to do. We want to have a good time. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to have a good time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of Bygone Bros. And today we are at the fair. My name is Kyle White, and I'm joined here by my brother Trevor White.
Hello.
Happy that you could be here with us. It is a hot summer day, at least in my apartment. How are you doing over there, Trevor?
Similar. I have a fan running in the background that hopefully won't be too much of an auditory burden. I checked it before we got on the air, and it, no pun intended, and it seems okay. So do it all right. I'm a fan.
Excellent. Well, the jig is up, I'm afraid, because I realize I just admitted that I'm in fact not at the fair. I'm in my apartment.
Yeah.
I know the background was very convincing. But the background is a hint, because today's episode will be about the county fair, which, at least in our neck of the woods, tends to be sort of a late summer into kind of fall season, maybe to coincide with the fall harvest. And sometimes it's more of a state fair and not just a county fair. But in the place that we grew up, it was sort of specific to our county, and we thought we would reflect a little bit today on sort of what that was like growing up. How does it compare to sort of the fair today, because it is something that persists to this day. And like any good topic, I suppose we should kind of jump in with our definitions. So Trevor, what is a county fair? What does that mean to you?
Well, the county fair, I think it has a lot of qualities to it. It is almost kind of a pie chart of aspects. I think there is an amusement park component, which is maybe in the grand scheme of history relatively modern, but at the core of it, I think, is this real rural element. There is a focus on I don't know what the word for herdsmanship, maybe. I don't know what you call it these days, but people tending to
Husbandry.
Husbandry. However the term works these days. The animals, showing off animals, chickens, pigs, cows, what have you. Collections of things. It is a community event, and communities historically in America have been divided. The intermediate way in which you divide areas is counties, because within that you have cities and towns, and you broaden that out to states and the nation and such. And the county, there's something about the county that really invites these gatherings where it is color, it is tints, it is a kind of spectacle, and that's what it means to me, is going out there and everything is a bit much in a good way. There's snacks, there's music, there's activities, and we'll get into more of those in detail as we talk here, I'm sure. But that's what it feels like to me, is a kind of mid-grade excitement, and I mean that in a complimentary way.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say, to me, the word I think of is tradition.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
American tradition. It's sort of like all of these different traditional American practices coming together in one place, and we can go a little bit more into what that list includes. But that's what I think of, is it's kind of a lot of the old-fashioned American cultural aspects and values and activities and certain things that back in the day were necessities that have now since become, maybe for some people still a necessity, but largely sort of a carrying on of those traditions. And that's how I would describe it. And the state fair I normally think of as being sort of a bigger version of that. Not just because the state's bigger than the county, obviously, but also the attractions, the rides, the entertainment, I guess the livestock, sometimes quite literally, is much bigger. And that's sort of the state fair versus the county fair. But just kind of looking, because I took some notes here ahead of this episode. We've got agriculture, we've got farmstead living, we've got, like you mentioned, animal husbandry, rodeos, music performances, cooking, baking, sewing, textiles, even like photography. It's really just all of that packed into one place.
The list goes on,
and the list goes on, exactly. So that's kind of what I think of in terms of the county fair, but it's not stagnant, even with a lot of those traditional roots. I mean, what has been at the fair and what people think of when they think of the fair has changed over time. And I guess this kind of brings us to sort of the bygone aspect of this episode, which is like, what are some of your memories of what a county fair was like, sort of, let's say, like 90s into like the early aughts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was always first and foremost a family activity. Certainly at that age, I wasn't being left unattended for the most part. And I remember it did seem all the bigger because you were so small, and these rides and these barns and these animals and I think there was at least one person on stilts running around or hobbling around, and the grandeur of it was quite significant. I mean, the fact that we're all able to talk about it in such terms, I think the imprint that it leaves is so grand, and just the excitement of being able to go on these rides and have these ridiculous treats that you probably wouldn't and shouldn't have other times of year. Even as somebody like us, and we sort of dance around this topic on other episodes, but who have been to other countries and who had been to places like Disneyland that did have an apples and oranges. I mean, you talk about spectacle, it's not even in the same category, but I mean, even this was still great because you just get to go a little distance. You just drive a couple of miles or into the next town over, a county over, and there it is. And that is its own local activity, and we had people that were involved in it historically in kind of a casual capacity or in something of a professional capacity, and we can talk about that a bit more as well. But that was sort of our in for that, I think, was our connection. Is it wasn't just something that happened to be happening in the area that people we knew were going to. It was also something that we had something of a connection to from people in our own family, and that felt special, even if I didn't necessarily relate to or like every single thing that was being shown at the fair. It meant that it felt like we had some kind of connection to it, and there was a pride almost in seeing the ways that we would weave in and out of it over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just to kind of expand upon that a little bit. I mean, our grandparents had, and I don't remember their exact titles, but they sort of had kind of almost like an administrative role, I guess. There were things at the fair that they would be, quite literally running behind the scenes. And as the grandkids, we would get to tag along. So we would be, back behind stage of the grandstands, or we would be like in an employees only room sitting there having, I don't know, a juice box or a Capri Sun or whatever we would be having at the time. But because it was the fair, and there is, to speak of another thing that's kind of a fair tradition is sort of this circus aspect. There's oftentimes kind of a combination with kind of the circus parts of culture. We would be sitting, I have these vivid memories of sitting in that back room, and there was like a great big like refrigerator that the different, drinks and stuff were in.
Yes, indeed.
And like the door would open, and like the tall man, the guy on stilts in this ridiculous outfit, would like be like bent over at a 90-degree angle, kind of like shuffle in through the door. And then he would like walk over to the fridge, lean way over so that he could reach down to get what was inside. And then he would just like plop down on top of the refrigerator and like take his break.
Yeah.
And it was such a funny visual.
Tall glass of water. Yeah.
A tall glass of water. Just like him coming in and casually sitting on top of the refrigerator before he went back out to work. And then there was another gal that was also kind of a family connection that was one of the clowns. She would come in sometimes with her full makeup. With other clowns, which is interesting because I have a general strong aversion to clowns, but I do have like positive memories of the clowns you actually know, like the ones that
the clown you know is better than the clown you don't.
That's precisely it. And so the clowns I knew, I was like, oh, this is a really friendly person, and so it was fun to say hello to them when they would come into sort of the behind stage spaces. So I have those kinds of memories too. But another part of a lot of these fairs is performance and stage, and oftentimes musicians. And that was another role that our family had, was helping with those acts.
Yep.
So with our grandparents, they would sometimes even help shuttle people to and from the airport to have them come and do performances at the fair. And so there's probably other famous people that we met that I didn't even realize who they were because we were just so young. But one memory I do have is the musician Joan Jett and the Blackhearts.
Yes.
I do remember being old enough to kind of know who she was and to say hello to her behind stage and see her concert and stuff. And that was probably one of my earliest memories of meeting like a major celebrity. Was at the fair.
Yeah, I remember that too. And I guess to kind of clarify, our grandfather, I don't know what particular capacity he might have been involved in other than I guess moral support and maybe offering a ride, but our grandmother specifically, she was in charge of the entertainment division for the fair, so like booking the acts that they would get for the show, because that's the everything too, and fairs to this day still do that, and I don't know how long this has been a thing, probably as long as music has existed in some form, but they would have these folks come through and do a stage show, and there were other names that in hindsight I was like, oh shoot, like Foreigner, and I think even the Beach Boys at some point. I mean, again, people that at that time I had proximate knowledge of. But Joan Jett, yeah, I remember that, and I didn't really know who she was, and I still don't really like super loud noise, so I was like, yes. I was trying to get away from a stage in the back, and then we both exchanged hellos afterwards, and some random guy just handed us CDs. So I was like, Cool. All right. And kind of a privilege in a way to have a literal backstage pass, and having that kind of connection to it in a way was something that I think might have also really influenced a lot of my own interest in just music and entertainment, and having that be something that we maybe took a little bit for granted at the time, although I certainly don't now.
Yeah, for sure. I like in that moment, I knew it was someone famous, but I didn't know why beyond like I know that this is a person that other people seem to really know. And then as I got older, I realized who it actually was. And then at kind of a different angle coming at those occasions, but also through our family was our dad, who at the time was also doing security. So he got to meet and be very close to, to helping protect a lot of the acts that would come through. And I won't tell any stories out of school, but he's got his own accounts of meeting some of these musicians, some of whom were really pleasant. I think he played like basketball with Toby Keith or something at one point. I need a citation on that. I think that's
I like hearsay. I really he can come on as a guest at some point maybe, but
yeah. But then there were other ones who I won't name who he said they were real like prima donnas and really just not pleasant to work with. So you get all kinds when it comes to musicians. But that was a connection we had too, and it wasn't really something that we were around as much, because obviously you can't have little kids around when you're trying to do security, so that wasn't something necessarily that we were around as much. And then sometimes we would also get involved with being on stage. So for instance, like our dad taught martial arts, and we were involved with those classes as well, and we would sometimes do these performances. It was called Kid Power. Was kind of the name for the youth taekwondo, and we would do these performances where we would get up on stage and we would do like patterns where you do certain moves in sequence. We would do what's called Hosen Soul, which was sort of like how to get out of like certain grabs or headlocks or techniques like that, and acro tumbling was another thing that we did, to where you'd roll on mats, and people much more experienced than us would do like flips and maneuvers and do that on stage. And we had this I think it was just like a CD player, like I don't even know if it was like a full sound system, but we just had this like CD player. And didn't we like pick the CDs for Dad or something?
I think we did get put in charge of music, at least for the parts that we were doing, and so it was just like the most turn of Y2K combination. I mean, it was mostly just like that kind of synth EDM video game music. There might have been some rock in there. Hopefully we can find that disc around at some point and give it another spin.
I think it was Prodigy.
Prodigy. Okay. Well, some of those lyrics, we must have had to kind of be very, just eyedropper sections of it.
Yeah, I could have sworn that it was Prodigy, or at least songs off of one of their CDs, like Fat of the Land or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I think we managed to sneak in a CD that like one of our friends had burned for us off of like using like Kazaa. And it was like video game remixes that were kind of synthy enough to pass for soundtracks, but then if you left the CD playing for long, it would start to get into like the other video game songs he'd burned on there. So I think there was a portion of like the acro tumbling thing where we kind of let it go too long, and it started playing like the original Super Mario Brothers theme or something. Like we had to step in and like catch the audio before it played too long, which I guess fits if you're like spring jumping into the air. But I have memories too of us performing on stage while like very discordant, I guess, music was playing that we found on the CD.
Yeah, no, it's Zelda probably was at least some Zelda in there. That seems about right for that time period. Post Ocarina of Time, pre Wind Waker, somewhere around there. Yeah. No, that was the days of just ripping. Not to get off on a whole side tangent about that, but just like ripping stuff onto a CD, burning stuff onto a CD. And you just write something on there and marker, and it's like, yeah, this is our workout mix, this is our acro tumbling presentation mix or whatever, and yeah, just let it fly and blast that through the speakers, and that's we're putting on our own performance right there. Yeah.
So I definitely have fond memories of that. We were behind stage for performances. We were sometimes on stage for performances as kids, and we would compete as well. And that's something we haven't mentioned yet, is that the fair isn't just a place to sort of engage in American traditions and cultural practices. It's also oftentimes a place where you compete in those things. And if anybody's ever heard, which you probably have, of somebody getting the blue ribbon or like something to do with getting a ribbon, that probably is related in some way to competition at fairs. I would think that's what I associate getting ribbons most with. Maybe that and like showing your pets or something. Yeah, so like we would do stuff as kids where, you know, our grandmother especially was really into baking, so we would bake things, and then kind of the way they do it is they have these big glass display cases, and you can walk up to them, and it's literally just the actual things that have been baked, and I don't know how long they let them sit there without refrigeration.
I think about that a lot. I think I walk by and I honestly get a little it's like those old automats where that have the little things that you come out of they're all just on display, but you can't get them.
Yeah, they should set a timer where, like, past a certain point, the doors unlock and you can just get at the food. So yeah, we would bake different goods and enter those in a competition with other people baking similar things. We would sometimes make art. You know, they'd have art competitions, and we would enter things in that. We didn't really do animal showing quite so much. That kind of ended with our parents' generation, I think, especially my dad, because he just was not very fond of it, and was not a huge fan of the animal showing. And I understand they can get ornery sometimes, but I have observed other people, you know, parading their cows and sheep and goats and chickens around, and the judges are trying to evaluate the sheen of the coat and, you know, how pristine their gait is, and are they disease free, and that's a huge part of the fair is showing off animals and having them compete. What are some other things I'm forgetting? What other things that we competed in as kids?
I mean my I have a handful of recollections, and I couldn't tell you the exact years that I did this, but that collections, hobby collections. Oh yeah, I liked collecting things, as I'm sure many people and kids do, and the one thing that I seem to recall specifically sharing was it was I think Goosebumps books or Calvin and Hobbes books, because I definitely had a collections of both of those, and I think I ended up showing those ones. I don't know if they won anything. I was just in it for the love of the game, so whatever. I don't know if I did any baked good stuff, maybe once or twice. I have a specific memory of, and I think that it was at the fairgrounds, at least. I don't know what else it would have been if not this, but I think it was the county fair. I was making clay figurines and selling them for a pittance. I think myself were you involved in that, or was it another classmate of mine?
So, interestingly, actually, what you're referring to, I believe, is the youth fair. And so our town had a youth fair that was in springtime, and it was basically Fair Junior. Like, it was much more towards kids than families or adults. And part of which both of us went through a gifted education program that actually our grandmother taught. But through that program called Apex, we had a thing where we had to have, like, our own business. Yes. And essentially a stall at the fair where we would run that business. I forgot that you did clay figures for yours, because that's what I did for mine.
So, I mean, we didn't do it at the same time, though, so did you just kind of do your version of it, or?
Maybe. I mean, mine I think was called, like, Crazy Creatures or Crazy Critters or something. Yeah. And I made things out of colored clay and then heated them in the oven so they would solidify, and then it was just little, like, monsters and animals and stuff, and I sold them for, I don't know, probably like $1 a piece, and by the end the price went down to like a dime or something.
It was a fire sale, but it was a fire sale. But no, I mean, and I think that spiritually was still a really same vibes, same environment. Certainly, I mean, the very fact that those kind of got muddled into my brain. Another thing, there was people that would sell books, kind of like we've talked about book fairs on the show before. Similar thing, might have even just been a Scholastic. I don't know who else it would have been at that time, but they would set them up, and I can picture the little kiosk where it was, with one of those little plastic cash registers where they were taking the cash from folks. And I don't remember what, if anything, I got in particular, but again, whatever we talked about that episode, Goosebumps, like I mentioned, the ones I had, probably some of those other little kids paperbacks, great place to sell that stuff, nice little short shells that a kid can get into. So those were something of which I partook.
I'm surprised you didn't mention your Garfield comic strips collection, because I feel like that's like the largest collection you might have of anything.
That might have been it, because I don't remember doing like a ton of, like, year after year doing collections, but maybe I did, because I mean I wasn't taking pictures of everything left and right with a camera, let alone a phone back then, so I don't know that I would have documented it as rigorously as I would now, where I honored it in such a way, but certainly while we're on the subject, had a lot of Garfield books. So if looking back, if I was to pick the one thing I had the most of that would have been most suited to such a collection, it probably was that, and I had other stuff too. One of those little stick on the window Garfields that were kind of an ancillary fad back in the day, and probably some other things. So it's kind of humbling, because we're sitting here trying to remember this stuff, and I'm getting mixed up about what I even put out there. But that just goes to show why it's important for us to be talking about this in the first place, so we have something on the record.
Yeah, I also recall Beanie Babies being a major collection, although I can't remember if we did that on behalf of our grandmother or if she had entered it herself.
I don't know. I feel like our collection was solid. But I definitely if I had to guess, somebody had an even bigger one, or they got there first, and I just felt like it would be passe. I mean, just knowing how I operate, that probably was where my mind went. But again, I wouldn't have put it past some of us to consolidate our collections for the sake of a grand display.
Yeah. I remember that being one that I saw at some point. Maybe that wasn't even us that offered that up. But I also remember at one point actually having a collection in there that was, I think, all of the, what was it, Burger King, like Nintendo toys.
Hey, there we go.
There was, I'm sure they've had a couple series over the years, but like one of the series, I think I'd like displayed my collection of those because I'd gotten quite a few of them from that set. So
Before I forget, were there any Legos from our side of the glass?
I don't remember necessarily displaying those as a collection.
Or making something with them?
It's possible. That is a common sight.
Yeah.
Like to this day, you'll often see Lego sets in that portion of the fair for what people are showing for their hobby in varying degrees of complexity.
It combines a hobby, a collection, and an art project.
That's very true.
That's why I like the stuff so much.
Yes, it's a great form of creativity. So those are some of the main things that stick out in my mind for the things that we competed in. I think through this process of talking through it, we've also been touching on different staples of the fair. Other exhibits, I mean, sometimes you'll have things for like, plants or other forms of art, like people like making things out of like wood, like chainsaw art, that sort of thing.
Sculptures, crops, physical things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mentioned earlier, like clothing and stuff. So people will sew their own like dresses or outfits or
quilts.
Quilts.
Textiles.
There's a whole section for that. So kind of the traditional arts of Americana as well. But then you start getting into the wares, the things for sale, and those can overlap with many of the things that we've described so far, but also sort of strange things that I think have been around since even the 90s and 2000s into today. But you have people selling like shirts with like pop culture references, little toys, bits and bobs, those kinds of things. What else? I have a memory of a booth selling like different toys that included like a spy set that like
yes, and I think that might have even been in the same place where they were selling the books, because again, the same businesses come out for these things, because at those book fairs, and I think we touched on this, I don't mean to keep harkening back to that episode, but like they wouldn't just sell books at these things, they would sell other things that were like
educational toys,
rectangular objects. I don't know how to describe, like stuff that you could light boxed things that a child could pick up and get, and they would be things like that, and here's a set of so-and-so, and sometimes they were functionally like, I think the spirit where that lives on now is like the stuff in the impulse checkout line at Barnes & Noble, where it's like kitschy, kind of like that kind of stuff, but for kids.
Yeah.
And the other booths too. I mean, you mentioned the clothes and stuff. I think that the kind of vendor or the kind of person, and this is value neutral, that sells stuff here are the same ones who are out on the boardwalk or they're in the middle of the lane at the mall.
Yeah.
It's like a combination of genuinely nice, neat little things, and then like knockoff toys, really tacky T-shirts, kind of dubious snacks. But that's part of the vibe. That's part of the atmosphere. And sometimes it's enough to just go look at it and be like, get a load of that. But like the one time that you see something or somebody does see something that they get a kick out of, well, where else are you going to find that?
Yeah, it's definitely a unique environment for the kinds of things you can find for sale at the fair. And that does bring us, as you just touched upon, to possibly one of the most important parts of American culture and the fair by extension, which is the food.
Yes.
The kinds of food that you'll find at the fair. And where do we even begin? I mean,
we begin with scones.
The scones. Let's talk about scones.
Don't bury the lead.
Most of you out there are probably not scone fans. I myself generally am not a big scone person. They tend to be, for those who don't know, a scone is, I guess, oftentimes a sort of somewhat triangular dough-based kind of bread.
Pastry.
I guess you'd call it a pastry. It tends to be kind of crackly in appearance in the way that the dough rises. It is usually, in my experience, rather dry. A lot of the scones I've had, you kind of have to fight your way through eating them, and they're sometimes too big. But there is that rare scone that has a unique sort of moist quality to it. For me, I like the fruit filling, and the Fisher scone, the coveted Fisher scone, which I believe has been around since we were kids and probably prior to then. It's had a pretty long legacy, if I recall correctly. And it's a simple scone. It's not terribly big. They sort of cut it a little bit in the middle to fill it with a raspberry jam filling, and it is divine. It is the main thing that I crave every year at the fair. out of all of the food booths is a good Fisher scone.
Yeah, it's downright Pavlovian.
Yeah, it's good. And they even sell like bags of mixed where you can make them at home, and they are pretty good, but nothing beats a freshly made one at the fair. The Fisher scone's excellent.
No question about it, yeah.
But it doesn't stop there. You've got barbecued foods. You've got different types of roasted corn. You've got the elephant ear, which is just a big old flat slab of fried dough covered in cinnamon, sugar, butter. It's more than any one person could ever eat, but we all try.
Yeah.
That's the elephant ear. What am I forgetting? Cotton candy. What else?
I think about like shaved ice.
Shaved ice.
Hot weather. It's a different experience, but I when I have shaved ice, it tends to be at a fair or at a similar outdoor gathering. But the classic corn dog and variants thereof, hard to beat that. I would save a deep fried food, but we didn't have those. I mean, maybe they existed and they just hadn't like spread their delightful menace across the nation from the south or something. But I don't think we really had those growing up. That's more of a recent thing. I don't think so.
That feels more recent to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly something that I mean, we're principally talking about fairs as a bygone matter, of course, but I don't think that we're really hiding anything to say that these things still exist and over time have gotten a bit more odd and exaggerated in many ways. But a big aspect of that has been how many more things can we deep fry.
Yes.
and I probably for the best that we weren't. I mean, I don't think our folks would have really approved of us eating those even if they did exist. Maybe they were there all along and we were just being politely shuffled around the corner so we didn't bear witness.
Possibly. I don't know. That to me feels like a newer phenomenon, at least in the Pacific Northwest. But it certainly is a staple now, which we'll get to in a little bit, kind of how things changed since we were young.
Sure.
But those are a lot of the big foods that stand out in my mind. Certainly when we were younger, I think it was more towards like just American with maybe some Mexican food thrown in.
Yeah.
Nowadays, which we'll get to later, it's different. It's more multicultural. But I would say that was more of our experience growing up. It was mainly those like classic American staples, those kinds of things. So that is a high level summary of some of the major food players. We may have missed some. Obviously, let us know if there's any that you guys out there think we've glaringly omitted. And what better to do when you have stuffed yourself to the gills with incredibly bad food than to proceed to throw yourself onto a vomit-inducing attraction, which is where we come to the rides, which as you can see behind me here, you've got the Ferris wheel, I think Yo-Yo is the name, all kinds of different rides at the fair. What are some of your memories of the ones when we were kids?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's... So I was very particular with those, and I still kind of am. I never wanted to go too crazy, but I also didn't want it to be something really, like that SpongeBob roller coaster where there's just the one little dip in the middle and they freak out. Like, no, I do want something a little bit exciting. I recognize that these things they collapse back into themselves like a folding chair after all is said and done. So I just get scared about something. I don't want to end up in a Final Destination 3 situation at one of these things. So I tended towards Scrambler. I don't know how to like physically describe this. I mean, I'll just put a picture of it up in post. But like the individual carts are rotating on arms, and then that itself is also rotating. So you get some real centrifugal force going there, slamming into the person next to you. That's a thrill. Tilt-a-whirl, I think is what it is. Similar situation where the platform is going kind of undulating and circling, and then the individual carts within it that are kind of like a clamshell dome or spinning around, and it's a little bit random when they hit that crest, so you can feel it going, and you get kind of whips around like that. The hang gliders, where you're in like kind of a faux hang glider, you got a thing under you, so you're cool there, and then it kind of goes up, and just the way they would combine movement like that. And I think that Ferris wheels, as iconic as they are, never really been a fan. Not scared of them, I just don't think they're that interesting because it's like, great, we're going around in a circle. I mean, not to be a killjoy, but like I think I've explained I like all of these rides, but the Ferris wheel, it was just kind of seemed more style over substance to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think when it was invented, it was a big deal, and it is a feature. Like you look at the Ferris wheel, and it is spectacular to look at.
It's iconic. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you're on it, I agree. You're kind of in this hot, kind of claustrophobic, trapped chamber. You're slowly kind of going around in circles, and I don't know. I don't find it very entertaining to be on.
I think the last time I was on one was it wasn't like a fair, but I have been on one, and it was somewhere where I hadn't been, and it was fairly tall, which is a little bit spooky when you get that high up, but it's a good way to get a view. And I think in the picture there, in a smaller fair where it's an environment that you're familiar with, which is nice, but it's not one of the 7 wonders of the world or anything. So I feel like there's not a whole lot to see that you can't already see on the ground once you get up there, and that spectacle is somewhat diminished. But it's all relative. Some people probably get a kick out of it, and that's fine too. And for people who may not be too young, too old, whatever, where that's about all they can take, then that's a great option.
Yeah, for sure. Other ones that popped into my mind, I keep wanting to call it the super slide. I don't know if that was the actual name, but they would have these great big slides that you would go up a long staircase to get to the top.
Yes,
and then they'd kind of give you like a potato sack, essentially, that you would like kneel or sit on, and then they would kind of, shove you like Ralphie in A Christmas Story down the slide.
Yeah.
And then you would go, bouncing down. Sometimes you'd get like air. Like
a little bit.
Get going so fast that you would actually fly and then hit and fly and hit.
I feel it now. I feel it still.
and as I think we've maybe mentioned before on here, with a lot of childhood slides that are like made out of metal or plastic, on those hot days it would get hot. So you would also be like trying not to burn yourself basically as you're like whipping down this like very, very high up slide.
The heat. Well, we're talking elementally. We're talking fire. Electricity was what I was concerned about because the static from the plastic.
Yes.
That was not as much of a problem on the big ones, and this dovetails into a different one, the fun houses, where it's like a grid where you're going through this obstacle course of things, and I don't know. There's mirrors and there's like bags that you're trying to beat back. This whole Running Man situation, and then I get up to the top. And I remember this. I don't remember if it was this fair or another one because there's other county fairs that we've kind of I've been mashing together in my memory here, where I got to one of these things and I realized that the slide or the way to get out of it was this circular plastic pipe, and I knew enough about these things to know. I was like, uh-oh. And I wasn't scared of the slide itself. I was like, well, I know how static electricity works. And I think I had somebody behind me kind of nudging me on. So I got in there, and I'm getting zapped from all sides. And I'm kind of like, ah!
Getting electrocuted by the fun house.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the not-so-fun house, that's definitely another one. Always with their strange art on the outside. Like, I think when we were kids, it was like
we got to pause and just recognize specifically the increasingly lost art of airbrushed fair just stuff.
Yeah.
Because just again, I'm trying not to get ahead of myself here, but like a lot of that nowadays is just going to be AI generated, or it's just going to be like clip art or whatever. And there is a delightful quality, and these old rides that hopefully are being well maintained continue to get carted out, and they still have these wonderful little images on them that are legally slightly distinct enough from certain celebrities or characters to be appropriate for whatever ride they're on.
Yeah, for some reason I thought I remembered one of them being like specifically Kiss themed, but I'm not positive on that.
Yeah, something rock adjacent. Yeah,
rock adjacent, but definitely a lot of fun art and some memories of what that was like pre AI generated days on those on those attractions. Another ride I remember being a staple, which I don't think is around as much maybe these days, but there was like, I guess I would call it like the bear ride. Like it was sort of like the Mad Hatter's Tea Party at Disneyland, but you would crawl inside of these like giant bears, like sculpted bears.
Yeah.
And you would sit in kind of this black, hot interior with this thing in the middle that you could kind of crank on to sort of try to increase the speed of how fast the bears spun as you were also going in circles. Do you remember that one?
I do, and I always remembered it. I don't remember like the part where you controlled it, but that would stand to reason. I just remembered it being like a more low-key version of something like the Scrambler, where they're spinning, everything's spinning, but it's just a little. You're in a bear, and it's slower. I really don't remember what made it different, but I think now that you mention it, if there was that element to control it, that was something that the Scrambler and the Tilt-A-Whirl would have lacked. So that would have been an additional component that one would have gotten a kick out of. Before I forget, too, speaking of just things spinning around, the Gravitron, we got to shout out the Gravitron.
Whew. Yeah, if you can get enough air in your lungs to shout it out.
Yeah.
Well, describe for us what is the Gravitron?
Well, the Gravitron, and I don't know if it has to take this form or if it was just culturally decided that this would be the case, but it looks like a UFO that's on the ground, and it may or may not have alien airbrush on it or something too. But like it's a spinning thing. And there's just a dude in the center who looks like they'd rather be anywhere else, but just, flips a switch.
Who hates his life.
The centrifugal force, is it centrifugal or centripetal? Whatever. It goes around and it just keeps spinning like this, and there are these individual seats that everybody gets up against on the walls that are sort of tiling. Yeah, and the faster it goes, you get plastered to the wall with that force to the point where you can't move. But then, like, they start going up, and I think the floor even might go out because they just know that it's not going to mess up, or they feel it's been, X amount of days since our last accident, so they do that. But I mean, I think a lot of these rides in general, you're going in for that physical thrill, that sensation of speed, or of like on this is county fairs. One thing I think would probably distinguish them is they don't tend to have roller coasters because those kind of have to be in place to be safe, and these rides are more transient. I mean, they're literally getting carted out later, but this is something that can do that and can still give you that feeling of like speed, essentially speed going out. And so you're just like, I'm gonna have to get away from the mic with this, but like you're just back on a chair, and I like, if you just woe to the person who turns over too much, because then you're just gonna flap right onto the person next to you and not be able to move. Like I remember being next to somebody doing that, and I was like, they were trying to get me off of them, and I was like, I'm sorry, I can't.
I physically cannot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's one of those. You want the sign that's like, don't go onto this thing. You have a heart condition or whatever. Like that's specifically one of those rides where when I know I'm old is when I'm gonna have to like look at that and really be like,
Yeah, well, because the last time I went on that, I had kind of an unsettling sensation where it felt like my actual windpipe was being compressed.
Oh, yikes.
And I felt like I actually couldn't breathe.
Yikes.
Or I couldn't breathe very well, and that was like very concerning. So the force that they generate on that is a lot, and I think especially if you like try to like turn your head to the side, you're gonna get stuck in that position.
Yeah, because it runs for like a couple of minutes. Like it's not, in the grand scheme of things, it's not terribly long, but it just, again, the comparison to something much humbler like a Ferris wheel. This is nothing like a Ferris wheel. This is your slowly going up and up. This is your very fast, like this.
Yeah. And I don't know if you mentioned this. I think I just briefly said it by name, but the yo-yo as well. I kind of like the yo-yo. That's basically, they kind of just like have you in these seats, kind of chain linked hanging seats, and then it sort of spins so that you're coming off the ground, and then it raises you, and you're just kind of like spinning in the air in these hanging seats as it goes around in circles.
That's one simple, of the ones that makes me anxious.
Oh,
I mean, I've done it before, but I just get that intrusive thought of a chain snapping and me flying off it. I mean, any one of these rides could do that, but I think that one I feel more vulnerable because the apparatus into which you are placed is pretty minimal. At minimum, there is the appearance of security, and hopefully it's backed up by the actual structure of like armrests or shoulder rests or whatever, or a seat, some carriage that you're going into. And this, it's pretty much just like a swing at a playground with a series of chains attached to the top of it. And I've had times in the past where I've fallen off of swings. They never broke or anything, but it just, my brain goes there. Even when I was young, I was going back to when I was even younger, and I fell off a swing or something bad happened on the playground, and it puts you back in that mindset.
Yeah, that is true. It is one of the, I guess, loosest looking mechanisms. It's not like a hardy, what's the kind of metal rope is what is coming to mind.
Chain?
Cable. Thank you. Good Lord.
Cable.
A cable.
Okay.
It's not like it's like strong, thick cables. It's like, it kind of looks like the links of a chain. And as you know, you're only strong as your weakest link. So when you're whipping around up in there, in the air. But knock on wood, nobody's flown off yet. Now, I've seen people throw up, but
well, have you ever thrown up after a ride?
I am sure I had to have done it at some point as a child, but I don't really actually remember it ever happening at the fair.
Yeah, I haven't. I mean, again, speaking of knocking on wood, I don't tend to get nauseous from rides. Maybe I just haven't pressed my luck enough. But those particular attractions never really got me to that point. I might get a little bit queasy or a little bit dizzy afterwards. I've definitely seen the aftermath or the event of people kind of having a bit of a reaction to some of these things. But I count my blessings that I don't quite get there.
Yeah, no memories of it happening to me. I for sure remember seeing other people throw up, because that is something that sticks with you.
Sticks all over the place.
Yeah, thankfully it wasn't on me, but I remember someone on the hang gliders at like the crest of the height, just like firing off onto the cement. I think at the one point the yo-yo, somebody threw up on the yo-yo. I don't even want to know what happened if somebody tried to throw up on the Gravitron and would just go like out and back in.
Well, it's staying put. That's the windpipe pressure you're feeling there.
Oh, yikes! So yeah, unfortunately, that is part of the fair between the food and then the rides. That's a recipe for disaster. But the rides aren't alone in that portion. Because at least in our fair, the rides are kind of off on one half, and then everything else is kind of on the other half. But with the rides comes the fair games, the carnival games.
Yes, indeed.
And the carnival games, I will say, I messed around a little bit with them as a kid. I really don't touch them as an adult, even though I probably have a better chance now than I ever did at winning them. But they are rigged. They are all rigged. It is one of those things in society that we've all just kind of agreed is okay to trick children.
Kids' introduction to gambling. The house always wins.
Kids' introduction to life isn't fair.
Yeah.
Because these games, I mean, I tried to, like, just for giggles, see how many of these I could remember and then write next to them in my notes, like, what is the style of rigging. So you've got, like, a thing where you shoot basketballs, but oftentimes the hoop is shaped like an oval. So it, like, doesn't quite fit the shape of a basketball. There's a game where you have to, like, throw, like, a big softball, basically, at, like, stacked milk jars. But these, like, metal milk jars are oftentimes, like, weighted, so they won't fall over, like, no matter how hard you hit them.
Yeah, and the ball's pretty light.
And the ball's pretty light. There's a classic one where you have to, like, take a big old, like, rubber hammer and you swing it down and you hit this, like, panel that's meant to make this piece shoot up and hit a bell at the top of a tower.
Yeah.
And good luck. I mean, that thing you have to really have, like, you know, John Henry style, like, sledgehammer force to get that to go up and hit the bell.
Yeah.
There's one where you have to climb up, like, a rope ladder at an angle, but it's just one rope down the middle, so when you start climbing it spins and you fall off. Are there any others I've missed? I know that's a long list.
I mean, those are definitely the highlights. I know there are dart throwing games, I guess you'd call them. I mean, it's not darts.
Oh, at the balloons.
Balloons. You're throwing darts at balloons. There's a racing game where you're shooting water into a hole and that makes the thing go forward, and then whatever the little icon or character is differs. I know there's like toy fishing.
Yeah.
I don't think maybe a long time ago there was real fish. You want to go super far back, but you know, far back I remember it was like little plastic fishies or something. And then whatever the game is, if somebody does end up winning something, then you have a panoply of delightful stuffed animals to choose from.
Normally bootleg counterfeits.
Well, yes, but the little ones I think were some of the consolation prize tier ones, but they're always trying to get you. They're suckering you in, or you know, the guy trying to get something for his squeeze or whatever. The big ones.
Yes.
The big plushies.
Yeah, there's always plushies that are, like, hanging from the roofs of these games that are, like, bigger than us. Like, they are, like, larger than an adult human, and it's like, you know, a teddy bear, or I'm trying to think of other examples, a snake, like just some sort of big animal, gorilla, and you're trying your darndest to win them. But oftentimes, like you said, if you do try to win, you end up getting something incredibly tiny they have, like, tucked under the kind of front panel or whatever of the booth, because you win in trying to get the big one, and then instead you get the tiny one, which is always kind of disappointing. But you mentioned the one where you're shooting water to try to move the carts. Now it is fun, I think, to play the competitive ones against, like, friends and other people.
Sure.
Because it's at least rigged equally for everyone.
Yeah, you're not playing against the dude sitting there taking your tickets. You're playing against, like, it's not PvE, it's PvP.
Exactly. And so actually one of the ones I do enjoy playing when it appears is that one where you fire water and you're kind of aiming like a jet of water using this little cannon. And I think it's normally a clown, like you're trying to aim into, like, the mouth of a clown or something.
Tell me to shoot a clown. I don't even have to ask twice.
I'll do that for free. No, sorry to the clowns out there, but you have to try to, like, basically expand this, like, balloon or whatever, and the first person to get theirs to pop is the winner. And
well, that's probably why I never. Well, I mean, you had me at shooting clowns. You lost me at making balloons pop. So.
yeah, it's that kind of Stephen King association maybe.
Yeah.
With the balloons, but that one I do remember enjoying quite a lot, and those ones where you're playing against other people, I think those can actually be quite enjoyable.
Sure.
But you can't forget about the carnival games when you're at the fair games. Some of the other ones, there's always been a rock climbing wall at ours, at least.
Yes, and that's devious because you look at that and you think, oh, this isn't like those other ones where there's these tricks. It's just climbing a rock wall. How hard can that be? But there's an asterisk on that.
So there's a couple of tricks they've deployed over the years. I don't know if it's the same nowadays, but growing up, they would use increasingly difficult handholds. So the closer you got to the top, they would get smoother. There'd be less of a grip. They'd get tinier. And the rumor is, because I never made it up this high, but the rumor is from friends I spoke to who were good at climbing, they would grease the top ones, which Granted, they did use safety harnesses, so any children doing this, they were, protected from falling to their death. But they were greasing the top holds. So the idea was you get to the top, you get some money or whatever, but like you're making them like extra slippery for these kids that are just trying to win a prize. So
I would say, to be fair, they shouldn't do that, but like this one was a little bit different because the other ones you're getting prizes. This one, it was like money.
yeah.
Like I remember when we did it was $50, and I was trying to get $50, and I didn't. These days, I think for adjusted for inflation, they've upped it to $100.
Yeah.
To be fair, I mean, unless there's even more strings attached that I'm not aware of other than the harness. I would say that $50 is worth more than I don't know how much the plushies cost. Maybe they should cost $50 if they're paying the workers a fair wage. But anyway, it was a different kind of prize, and that was what kind of made it more alluring because I was like, yeah, forget the stuffed animals. I want the cold hard cash.
Yeah, because I think back then, at least, I don't know if it's that way now, but I thought I remembered being able to look up and you could see, because you had to physically grab it.
I have a memory of that. Yeah, they probably clipped it to something. Yeah.
Yeah, you had to come up there and actually get the money from the top. So that was definitely one that actually was and is still there to this day. And then, like you mentioned too, there's normally something involving like a pull-up challenge or something that's tied into National Guard recruiters or things like that. Another attraction that had popped into my head in terms of entertainment was that there was often rodeos. So we weren't really a horse family growing up, but there was sort of a big grandstand space with a huge kind of dirt field, and there was oftentimes performances involving horses as well. So for those of you that are out there and really into horses, do not fear, that was a large part of the fair growing up.
There really is something for everybody, even if it all does kind of fit into that banner of rural Americana, whatever, however you conceptualize that. It's a fairly broad umbrella, but there will be whole sections of it that we didn't necessarily engage with, but we knew people who did, and we would see them going about it or hear the cheers or the galloping or whatever, and I'm sure there was exhibits that we checked out that other people kind of didn't get the time of day. So it's nice to have that diversity of options.
Yeah. Now, was mutton busting a thing when we were kids?
If it was a little more niche. I've only seen stuff like that crop up more in recent years.
Okay, well, that's a perfect bridge into us discussing our next subject for this topic, which is, let's talk about the fair now, the fair today. We were at the fair. Gosh, was that last week? It was. Or 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago, I think.
2 weeks ago. We were just recently at the fair. So this is a perfect opportunity to compare what we saw 2025 versus, 2005 or earlier. Let's start with mutton busting. I feel like it's actually gained in popularity over the years, despite there being, more helicopter parents and people being overprotective.
It was only recently legalized, perhaps.
It was only recently legalized. And it goes against the trend of people becoming more protective of their children, because it's basically child rodeo, where you are sitting a toddler on like a lamb, right? It's like a
sheep. Yeah.
Is it I don't know if it's a full-grown sheep or a lamb.
I mean, proportionally, I'm not sure.
But you're putting them on there with a helmet and just pushing them out there and seeing how long they last, how long they can stay on that animal before they get bucked off and go flying through the air, and their comparatively soft child head is smashed into the ground. But it's pronounced mutton bustin'.
Yeah,
it's not mutton busting, it's mutton bustin'. So you got to say it correctly. What are some other things that you feel are modern additions?
For me, fair is such a perfect topic. It's almost kind of really easy for us to talk about on the show, and yet I think also a challenge, because I think I go to the fair now and I still see, might even literally just be the same machines that have been there in the past. Same kinds of rides, same kinds of exhibits. So there is the stasis to it, but there are little things that change. Again, the kinds of things that are being sold at these booths. Back in the day at my Pokemon or Scholastic Books, and now I go and it's just knockoff Labubus as far as the eye can see.
24-karat gold Labubu.
Yes. Or where people once might have been smoking, now they're vaping, or where there were once stuffed animals of non-denominational whatever, or again, I just default to Pokemon because that was everywhere when we were younger. Pokemon stuffies. Now we have rainbow poop emoji ones or whatever. And again, I'm not gonna be old man yells at cloud on here, but like that to me is where I'm just like, really, this is where we're at right now. Okay, the iconography aspects of it change. The things people are drawing and showing in their exhibits, the collections that they have. But they'll be right next to things that feel like they could have been there long ago. And there's something wonderful about that, because it means like, oh, these traditional forms, even if I don't do them, I don't knit, I don't really cook much. I mean, I do make things sometimes, but I don't really make fresh pies and give them out or whatever. But like, people still value that. And it's such a wonderful and yet sometimes amusing and strange space to be in, where you can walk around and see these old and these new things that are coalescing in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. There's a timeless quality to the fair. It is at its core meant to preserve a lot of those old traditional values. I mean, I think that, continuing to do things like raise cattle and show them off, or, chickens, or, other livestock, making your own clothing that's kind of, almost prairie dress styles, and baking kind of classic recipes. All of these different things do persist in our modern society, but they're far less emphasized, and those skills are definitely, in the grand scheme, I think, continuing to fade away.
Yeah.
And there is almost a sort of preservation aspect to the fair. But like you said, there's also this blending of newer generations, younger generations that aren't solely focused on what their grandparents liked. They're also moving forward, and they're experiencing new things in the world. And that's where you get these changes in prizes and toys. And you mentioned that, now that's AI generated art that's being used on these rides, and new foods being introduced. So like you mentioned, there's all these crazy deep fried things. This last time we had deep fried Oreos.
Yes.
And deep fried cookie dough. I think both of us only got a couple bites in before we thought our hearts would explode.
It's just so decadent. And I also see the art exhibit, and there's kids doing these like 2000s anime looking drawings of their OCs or whatever show they like. I'm like, oh, that does my heart well. Like that style is still around, and just again some of the goofy shirts that I thought were kind of tacky back in the day or whatever. I see those and I'm like, no, but now that kind of takes me back to when I was here in the 2000s or late 90s, and some of the things that are kind of gauche or goofy or irreverent next to the things that are very humble, and some probably would say sacred or mean a lot to them. You pull the camera back, you look at the world now, everything, the internet, everyone's fighting to get attention on the algorithm, on YouTube, whatever, just millions of hours of content, capital C content going out there. People that have these little things that they're proud of, where did they get recognized? And the answer is places like this, where something as simple as just a nice piece of pie can get a little ribbon. And maybe people can, from who aren't familiar with this or don't care for it, might think it's kind of treacly and kind of quaint, but I think there's really value in, like, I go there and I see things, I'm like, shoot, this person is really good at this. They're really good at sewing, or they made sword that shoots fire or whatever.
Yeah. Cool.
Or have these really fun collections and things that, they're not gonna be the number one trending thing on whatever site you like. They're not necessarily gonna blow up on TikTok, but they could. And even if they don't, people here like them. I like them. I go through there and I see things that show talent, they show skill, they show passion. And it is all local, and it's something that's only there for a while. It's not there all the time, and I think that a lot of the specialness of it would be gone were it. It's also a gathering place, and as much as we have talked about things about it that have meant a lot to us, I know that I've seen people go there where it means a lot more to them. Like, this really is their thing. And it's great to have something local that can be someone's thing.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, because we've talked about third places and things like that, I think, on the show before. And I think that, to talk of sort of like fame and popularity and I guess recognition, ultimately, like what feels better, what matters more, like getting that recognition in a place where you can see the person across from you, interact with that person in real life, because oftentimes the person who's winning the award or who is presenting the thing that you're admiring, they're there in front of you, and you can form a connection, and it's with a thing that's in real life. It's physical. There's not really digital stuff at the fair. It's all there. It's all physical. And is that more meaningful than posting something out onto the internet to people you'll never meet, you'll never know, and hoping that you'll get admiration from these people that aren't in your community, that aren't in the same space as you. And going to the fair is about as local as it gets. At least the county fair is about as local as it gets. And we always would bump into people. Even this time I was seeing old classmates of mine walking around the fair, and you're forming real community and real connections in a place, and that's increasingly rare these days.
Yeah.
So certainly that's a great aspect of the fair as well. Other things about the modern fair that come to mind for me in terms of things that have changed, I think monster truck rallies don't really maybe those were a thing growing up and we just didn't notice, but you know, having kind of these destruction derbies and monster truck rallies, and
it's a bit loud, but I'm into it.
Yeah, it is extremely loud, but we saw that. Obviously the music performances can somewhat change. Oftentimes we do get kind of musicians that are further along in their career who end up coming to the county fair. You know, at one point we saw like Weird Al Yankovic, I think in like the 2010s. That was really awesome. So sometimes the acts get a little bit newer, but also bringing back some of the oldies. Here's a hot topic. Do you remember as a kid if they had like the hyper politicized booths for like the Republican and Democrat parties, or is that a more recent thing?
They probably were there in some capacity, but because that's an interesting additional thing, is you'll have everything we've talked about, but then at least the way it is now, and I know it was in the past because I think our folks even had a booth for one of their businesses in there too. Is kind of a section, almost like a longhouse type place, where there would just be people selling stuff, like repping for businesses, repping for organizations. Like, here's some shingles, here's some. And for some people, their business is promoting, whatever their party is, or whatever local wing of their party it is. So I think that they, just because of just me gesturing vaguely at everything, I think that probably has become more pronounced in recent years. But you go to the fair, you're going to see some people with some wearing some interesting positions on their sleeves.
I think that is sort of a sign of the times, without speaking of one side or the other, that just there is a lot more political expression. I think a lot more extreme political expression on both ends, and that's something I feel like has become more pronounced over the years at the fair. Obviously, like, as you can assume, a lot of it is bent more towards kind of a conservative side of things. I think conservatism is part of tradition and being very focused on the past, and that's what a lot of the fair evokes. But some of that's changing too. We're seeing other aspects where it's changing. So that was another thing I think that feels different maybe from when we were kids. Well, I feel like we've covered most of the facets of the fair. And that's probably a good transition moment then for us to come to our final segment, Bring It Back or Bygone. And this should be an interesting one because, as you mentioned, a lot of the aspects of the fair never went away. They've largely persisted, and so there isn't maybe as much to bring back. But what do you think in terms of the fair of our childhood versus...
Just to lead off, I mean, I would say a hearty bygone to all the rigged games. You can keep the games, but I want them to be fair.
Yeah.
Bygone implies that they're gone, and I want them to stay gone. But unfortunately, they're still here. They're still cheating kids and parents out of their I guess it's tickets now, because legally I don't even know what. Like, they're not taking money. You got to buy the tickets, and then you physical V-bucks basically.
Right.
But anyway, I think that if I was to bring anything back, it would be something that really can't come back, and is the feeling of being there when you're younger. And I still enjoy it now, but I think the double-edged sword of it is because it stays so similar. It's not just that there's nothing that's really left, it's that what leaves is kind of the newness. It's like, oh, look at all these rides. I mean, you're first learning about the kinds of things that they sell there and the kind of things that the rides are in the end, and there are of course something different every time, and different exhibits and things that you might not have tried before or wanted to try. So I would be foolish to say that it's exactly the same all the time. If it was, I'd stop going because I don't like repetition. But I think for me, it's an interesting example of kind of the bittersweetness of when it is the same all the time, because then you can go back and feel like a kid again and come back on those memories and see these things that have become different. But then, I wanted to go this year and I did, and I enjoyed it, but I think it reaches a certain point where it's like, I know where all this, especially this specific fair that we've been talking about mainly, I kind of know where all the stuff is. I know what I like. I know what I don't. I know where to go. I've got this thing down to us. Like, I'm speed running a game that I've been through. And I can still have a good time, but I think the trick dulls over time. And so I think if in that sense, nothing really has left substantively. But what I would maybe want to bring back, and maybe this is a challenge to myself, is to go in there with fresh eyes, and to find it within myself to bring back that sense of wonder. Not that I don't think I'm giving off the impression that I've been disillusioned or crabby about it in any way, but to go in there and maybe try a ride I haven't tried before. Maybe see if I can find some enthusiasm about the Ferris wheel, or maybe even give myself a break and go on one of the more lower key rides, or buy something from a booth that I might not otherwise buy something from. To use the repetition and that nostalgia as an opportunity to create new memories within the old ones.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I would agree. I think that in that vein of Bring It Back, I think I also sometimes get so into that pattern, after all these years that we've gone, I know my spots. I'm going to get my scone. I'm going to get my this and that. I'm going to do a quick lap and then I'm out. And I do think that I overlook some of the things that I haven't done for a long time, or things that I might actually enjoy if I didn't just jump to that assumption of oh, I've seen that for all these years. What is there to gain from engaging with this again? And I don't know, because we don't really live down in that area now, if I would maybe necessarily enter anything into like competitions. Maybe if I was like in the area for a little longer period of time or something, I could do that. But even like you said, just trying a food or going on a ride or trying a rigged game, who knows? Maybe I can overcome the weighted milk jugs or the hammer and bell game at this stage of life. But yeah, I think there's certainly an element of bringing that wonder back. And I think some of that too comes with, if you go with a person who maybe hasn't been to the fair before,
Sure. Yeah.
someday you have kids, you get to see it through their eyes.
Well, that's the passing of the baton, of a torch, like sharing that experience with somebody. That's why it has such roots, and it becomes a good kind of rite of passage. Where, hey, I went to this when I was younger. Check it out. Make memories. Pass that along. And because it is so social, like I think a lot of things we've talked about can have social components, but it's also just been like stuff. We've talked about books and phones and aesthetics, and those can create a lot of wonder and create a lot of good memories. But we're talking about like a place, and we're talking about activities and things that you can do with other people, and like reach out and touch in a much more substantive way. And I think that is its own power.
Do more things in real life.
Yes.
Touch grass, touch livestock.
Concrete, touch a deep fried Twinkie. Yeah.
Touch. Yes, that's always good to build up your local community, make it stronger, and appreciate the past, but also find ways to continue to develop into the future.
Absolutely.
And that's what the fair is all about. Okay, well, I think that's a good point to end on. I think that this has been a really fun journey, a roller coaster ride, if you will, through the fairs. Although I guess we said those aren't really at fairs, but you know what I'm trying to do here.
Fair enough.
But fair enough. There we go. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. It's been a little gap in episodes, but it's great to be back here, and we'll continue to come up with fun topics to share with you guys. And as always, please let us know if you think of anything that you'd like for us to go over on this program. So, without further ado, I've been your host, Kyle White.
I'm Trevor White.
And we are the Bygone Bros.
Bye.
Bye-bye.